Hey everyone, Brian here from Exact IT Solutions. Welcome to another video where we educate you about cybersecurity and all the crazy things that are going out there with cyber attacks and cyber criminals. Today we're going to talk about a follow-on to the Fireeye hack, some things that have developed over the weekend where the United States government has also experienced a similar type of attack, and it's pretty much been figured out at this point that it's led through one vulnerability from one software vendor, and we're going to talk about that in this video. But before we do, please remember, we don't get paid for this channel. We don't do anything like annoy you with sponsorships. Just hit that like button for us on this video. If you like our content, maybe you'll consider subscribing to our channel as well. But that's all we ask for you in terms of a fee for our content. So if you could do us that huge favor, we would appreciate it and produce more content for you like this that you're going to see today. So without further ado, let's jump into the content. All right, so on the screen, I'm looking at a write-up here from Microsoft related to the basically the same attack that happened to Fireeye. We're starting to see things happening in other places. The United States government has announced over the weekend that several various departments within the government, including the US Treasury, have also experienced a similar type of attack, and all roads lead back to one piece of software known as SolarWinds Orion. SolarWinds Orion allows large organizations to manage network devices very easily. And apparently, as I read through this breakdown by Microsoft, there's a lot of things that are going on here. I'm not going to get too technical in this video. I'm just going to highlight to you some of the things that we know so far and what it means, and what we can do about it if we could potentially be one of the people affected. If you use SolarWinds Orion, you are definitely somebody who needs to pay attention to what's going on out there. So right now, Microsoft or the security researchers are saying they don't know how the initial backdoor into the code happened, but essentially somebody inserted malicious code into this Orion platform at some point in time. They believe it was back in the spring. They don't know if it was done by somebody through the software development team or if it was done through maybe a patch or an update. But basically, it goes on to say that the research indicates that the attackers might have compromised an internal build or distribution system of SolarWinds, embedding a backdoor code into a legitimate SolarWinds library with the file name solarwinds.orion.core.businesslayer.dll. The backdoor can be distributed via automatic update platforms or systems in target networks seen globally since March of 2020. Microsoft security researchers have limited information about how they compromised this said platform at this point. So that leads us to believe, that either they were able to get in to SolarWinds network and manipulate things so well and hide themselves so well that, and then at the same time put this backdoor into this code without SolarWinds knowledge, or somebody at SolarWinds was compromised and they helped along the way, helped somebody get this code in here. And essentially what a backdoor is a backdoor is legitimate software that somebody can use to then gain access to your system. Now in this case, what they did was they put code in, and the code then called back to what is known as command and control servers. It's just a fancy description given to servers that somebody uses to control other devices, other computers. And that's what was happening here. Once this successfully deployed onto a system, it would report back to these criminal hackers, and these criminal hackers would essentially have access to these networks that the Orion platform was running on. And this can happen to anything. This can happen to any device that you plug into your network. This can happen to coffee makers. This can happen to cameras. This can happen to computers. This can happen to pretty much any software or firmware that you install on any device. If somebody puts a backdoor in that says, the backdoor says, do this, call my server, do all these things, that can happen. So you may think that you're purchasing a piece of software or a product that's secure and that you trust a certain entity, but somebody along the way in that supply chain was compromised, and it caused something like this to occur. It goes on to say that the embedded backdoor code loads before the legitimate code executes, and organizations are misled into believing that no malicious activity has occurred and that the program or application dependent on the libraries is behaving as expected. So that basically is telling us that any kind of anomaly detection type of monitoring that you might be doing or looking for isn't going to show up here, because it's obfuscated under the guise of this is legitimate activity on this software. And a lot of the things that we do in security rely on us to take a look at things that are not normal. So that's a big piece here, is that hackers are trying to get better at making their activities or what they do or when they're on a network to make it look like it's quote unquote normal behavior. And then above and beyond just making themselves look normal, you also have these things called signatures. And what signatures are things that are on operating systems when software installs. So Microsoft requires trusted signatures, Apple requires trusted signatures, Linux requires trusted signatures, or at least it tells you when it's not a piece of trusted software that it knows about. And what the attackers did in this case, and it's a very common thing that we're seeing with attackers, is using old trust in older versions of software, trust in older things that are basically no longer used, that for whatever reason those things were never taken out of the trust circle for Microsoft or Apple or who would have you. So Microsoft still trusts software that might be very old, and is that right or wrong? Who's to say? If the software is still active and used, I don't see any issue with that. But when software kind of goes end of life and goes retired, the hope is that people like Microsoft, and there's people elsewhere that are updating these libraries and these databases with the signatures that every piece of software has, so then they become untrusted. So that way, if you, the unsuspecting user, decides to run this software on your computer, Microsoft's going to say, hey, we don't trust where this is coming from. And many of you may have seen a similar message to that in your time of using computers. And typically when that comes up and says, hey, we don't trust this software, you really shouldn't install it, you probably shouldn't. And in this case, these hackers took the backdoor that they built and they applied all these old trusted signatures to their files. So when it got installed, the software looked at it and said, oh, yep, that's trusted, good to go. And it never prompted anybody about anything to look at anything. So they, in the first two steps here, they've done their job in obfuscating and making sure that nobody kind of was alerted to this activity that they see going on. The article goes on and it describes what I described earlier about how the DLL calls out to a remote network infrastructure using the domains avsvmcloud.com, and then that prepares or possibly prepares second stage payloads and allows them to move laterally in the organization and or compromise and exfiltrate data. So that is And it goes on, the article goes on to say that they've noticed attackers have either gained administrative access using compromised privilege accounts or by forging SMAL tokens. So, basically the hackers are pretty much able to take over your network once they get this far. Once they get to command and control, and then they can get their software and their payloads installed on your network so then they can move further, that's when things really start to happen for these hackers and they get further access to these networks. So that's what's going on. That's 3 days from the original Fireeye hack. It looks like Fireeye was using this Orion software, so was the government. There are a lot of major companies, enterprises in the enterprise that are using this software today. So I imagine that we're going to find out that a slew of companies and governments were affected by this particular breach from the SolarWinds Orion. The other thing that's going to be interesting is to find out from SolarWinds how this actually got into their software. So that's where we're at today, folks. I mean, it's getting crazy out there. The cyber criminals, in my opinion, are still winning the war when they're able to do things like this and put backdoors into legitimate software, especially software that's purpose is to manage and maintain massive networks. You're really given the keys to the kingdom here. And let's hope that we all learn from this and that we all get better at security and understanding where our blind spots are, because we don't always recognize where our blind spots are, but you can bet the criminal hackers know where they're at because they're looking for them all the time. So have a good day, folks. We'll come up with an update as soon as we have more information. Stay safe out there. Take care.